Hey everybody, welcome to Co-working Night. I want to introduce Noah Huber-Feely, who's the recently appointed lead organizer of Co-working Night. He's from Tennessee, and he drives down here every Wednesday night to organize. He's 16 years old and is going to speak tonight about being an autodidact, meaning being someone who teaches oneself and how that has merit in today's world. So here's Noah.
Thanks, Chris. So, as he said, I'm going to be talking about autodidacticism, also known as self-education. And so, first it's good to just really understand what it means to be an autodidact. And so the literal definition is a self-taught person. And some key attributes is that their education is completely personalized to them and unique to them because they plan the entire education and they create their own curriculum basically. And so there will never be the same form of teaching because each autodidact is teaching themselves. So you can learn with whatever learning style you learn best at. And so it's just a great way to tap your full potential because you know yourself best and can therefore teach yourself in the best way. And so a common thing that autodidacts can do is with a limited amount of information, they can then draw conclusions about other things. For instance, if they got a little pamphlet about physics, and let's say they know nothing about physics before, so they can read a bit of information in that pamphlet and then draw conclusions about other theories and concepts in physics that they never heard about before. Just like the scientists before them were able to create these new concepts and theories. So in my education, there have been times where I've learned a few facts and then I'm able to figure out this other fact that I was never told or read, and then I can verify that it's true. But through that, I've discovered information that's new to me, but has already been discovered. So basically, you don't need a lot of resources, you don't need a lot of information to teach yourself and go far beyond the material that you have on hand. And also, another aspect is that you don't need to have an expert that you can ask questions to. In regular teaching, there will be a teacher that knows the material very well. So if you're ever stuck on something, you can just go ask a teacher, and they should be able to help you understand it better because they know the material. But if you're teaching yourself, then you don't have an expert to go to ask your questions. So you have to be able to figure it out on your own with the material you have. And so these are some key aspects. And some famous autodidacts, just to name a few, are Benjamin Franklin, Malcolm X, Leonardo da Vinci, and the Wright brothers. And so some of those individuals did have a little bit of formal education, but primarily they taught themselves basically everything that they knew. And I hope that some soon-to-be famous autodidacts will be you all. So anyone can be an autodidact, and you can expand your knowledge and then use that for productive means and potentially become famous because of it. So yeah, there's this question that seems to have a pretty obvious answer, but it's just, why learn? Like, what is the benefit of learning? And so some things that I saw in that is that if you're in a professional career, it keeps you relevant because as the careers expand and evolve, you need to keep up with the current trends. And this is especially clear in technology where new languages and other things pop up all the time, and you have to master them if you want to keep a successful career. And then it also enables you to pursue your passions, because if you're really interested in a subject, then by learning about it, you can really master it and find all this interesting information which you can find genuinely useful. And so it can also just help you grow and live a more fulfilling life. So yeah, that's basically just my reasons for why I learn and why I enjoy learning. And so as an autodidact, all you need is really a lust for knowledge. It can just be like some sort of interest in learning. And with that, you can accomplish anything. And it of course helps to have a public library as a resource, or a computer, and an internet connection is obviously useful as well, but you don't need any of that to actually learn. And as you'll see, I didn't have many of these resources, and at one point, none of these resources as I was learning in my education. So it really shows that you don't need those. So as a little bit of background about me, so then I can go into talking about my personal experience as an autodidact. So I grew up on a farm. We had no electricity, and it wasn't until like many years into my life that we finally broke down and got solar energy. So we weren't, so we finally had electricity, but we of course couldn't have the power on all the time because we had batteries, but that wasn't enough to keep the power on constantly. And we had animals initially, but then that became too expensive, and so currently we merely grow all our vegetable needs. So basically, it's still a lot of work, but I still live on the farm, and we have no running water in our house, and so throughout my education, as mainly homeschooling, it was critical to have the motivation to learn, because if I wasn't interested in learning, then I could not have gotten nearly to the point where I am currently, because it takes self-motivation in homeschooling to really push yourself to achieve great things and learn far beyond what one currently knows. And so throughout my homeschooling education, especially in high school, I really had no one to ask questions to about the subject matter. So I had to purely rely on textbooks and other resources to find that information. And it wasn't until near the start of this year that we actually got got Wi-Fi at home, and so I wasn't able to look things up on the internet before that point, unless I went to the library or something like that. So I really had to rely on a very small basis of resources to learn from. And so I did attend a more traditional school for several grades, and in 7th grade, I actually attended a private school, which was really centered around college prep, and so they would try to push the students to achieve far more than in a regular public school situation. And so although I was able to score very well there, I wasn't satisfied because I knew that I could learn faster. And to me, education is not about the grades. Grades, to me, are pretty meaningless. All they show is that if you didn't get a perfect score, then you obviously don't know all the material. And I don't see the point of learning a subject if you, say, get like a 95 on the test. Well, then you didn't actually truly learn all the subjects. So I think that one should try to actually develop a complete understanding of the material so that you can basically score perfectly on any given test, and then you truly have mastered the material and can move on with an underlying basis of knowledge. So so basically, when I began 10th grade, I had learned physics in the past grade, and so I really wanted to learn calculus because there's so much that you can do in physics that requires calculus. And so I was beginning Algebra 2 in that year, and I decided, hey, why can't I learn Algebra 2, trigonometry, pre-calculus, and calculus all in the same year? And so I decided that that's what I was going to do, and I would divide the year into quarters, into segments like that, so that I could devote that bit of, so basically a quarter of the year, to learning one subject completely and extensively. And so that was definitely difficult, and without an internet access, I couldn't just quickly look things up. But it was, as an autodidact, I was able to gear my education toward myself where I could learn at the best possible, in the best possible way and at the best possible rate for me. So basically, that's one benefit of teaching oneself. You can really explore your interests at whatever pace you want. And throughout my education as a homeschooler, it has always cost me and my family nothing. So I was able to get textbooks at the local library and other things, and other places. And so basically, education doesn't have to cost a lot. In fact, it can cost nothing at all. And so what really shows the strength of autodidacticism is when you can teach yourself a completely new field that you've never approached before without knowing anyone in that field, and you can't ask questions to someone in that field because you obviously don't really know anyone that's pursuing that. And so this was true for me with computer science. So for basically, I mean, for practically all my life, we were living a low-tech to really no-tech lifestyle. And so I didn't really know anyone that was a computer programmer or was interested in that sort of thing. And so when I decided to begin learning computer programming, I had no one to look up to that I knew personally and no one to ask questions to. So I didn't let this hold me back, and instead got as many textbooks as I could and really devoted time and effort to learning. And so eventually I did find this co-working night, and this was the first time that I truly had a group of people to talk about coding with, and so this was a truly amazing experience. And there's definitely something to be said about learning in a group, and there's nothing wrong with formal education, but it is definitely not necessary. And in fact, I began learning to program without a computer. And that's difficult, of course, but I was able to begin that way, and then eventually I was able to sort of like crowdfund the resources to get a computer for myself. So that was really great, and then I was able to start a web development business and really go on from there. So it has been like a really tremendous journey from being dead set on being a fantasy fiction writer, and I'd wanted to be that for basically my entire life, and then suddenly I found that I loved computer science so much more, and that was about 1.5 years ago when I first discovered that interest, and I've been pursuing it ever since. So here's a quote from Albert Einstein about his experience with formal education. "One had to cram all this stuff into one's mind, whether one liked it or not. This coercion had such a deterring effect that after I had passed the final examination, I found the consideration of any scientific problem distasteful for an entire year." And so he was showing how with all these deadlines and structures and rules, it really didn't allow him to tap into that creativity. So as an autodidact, you can keep yourself motivated and interested by pursuing things that you genuinely want to, while also, of course, taking care of the basic knowledge that maybe you don't want to do so much, but is still required to move on. So one can keep oneself motivated and interested in a way that it's much harder in formal education. So the world is constantly evolving, and so it's becoming increasingly crucial to be able to learn lots of new things. And it's most effective to be able to learn it on your own. And so, for instance, like a good example of where I needed to learn something new, and it was required in my job, but I had no previous knowledge of it. And that was with learning JavaScript. So suddenly I had an assignment with a client that I needed to complete, and it required some coding in that language. And I'd never taught myself JavaScript before, but I was able to, at this point I had internet, of course, so I was able to look online, copy and paste, and hack together some code. And then through that, I was able to learn the basic structure of JavaScript. And to this day, I've never actually formally taken a JavaScript course or read through a textbook in that language. And now I've been using Node.js, which is a purely JavaScript language, or a purely JavaScript framework. And so one really doesn't need much to learn a new concept. But luckily, learning is becoming much easier with all these online resources available. And so some of those are like edX.org, khanacademy.org, and lots of other places. But then there's also podcasts such as My Code is Broken by a local Huntsville citizen named Dan Nagel. And then there's also 99% Invisible and lots of other resources. And then there's, of course, educational apps such as Duolingo, Primer, and Microsoft Math. And so it really, you can learn any concept for little to no cost, and it's very easy through the online mediums. But it's important to remember that you don't need any of those resources to really gain that knowledge. And back in the day, like with the Wright brothers and others, they, of course, didn't have internet, and so they had to learn all these things through experiential learning. And so that basically closes up my presentation about my experiences with autodidacticism. And so I hope you all were able to gain an interesting perspective on self-learning. And you can find me on Twitter at nhuberfeely, Nhuberfeely. And so I hope you all enjoyed the presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Great. Have your parents been supportive of all of this during all of this process of going through school?
So yeah, the question is whether my parents have been supportive of my education throughout my homeschooling years. And so the answer is that they definitely have been, even though when I was doing things like calculus, they don't really know calculus well enough to teach it. So that definitely required me to really devote a lot of time to that. But throughout my education, they were always supportive and have been in every area of life.
What about software? So like calculus, physics, these are hard subjects, have yes/no answers or have right answers, right? There's other softer subjects, psychology and philosophy and things like that, where there's different opinions, right?
Yeah.
So how do you how can you teach yourself that sort of stuff when maybe there is no right answer, right?
Yeah,
you can go down a certain path.
So that's definitely something that's really important and crucial. It's been something that I've really tried to find an answer for. And for instance, teaching myself literature, it's really useful to have group discussions in which you can see other people's perspectives. And that is definitely something where group learning in a classroom environment or some other sort of similar surroundings, that is really useful. And so I've attended, like for instance, a Spanish table where I can speak Spanish with others, and that has been crucial in learning Spanish and being able to actually speak it. So there's definitely something to be said about learning in groups. But then there are also resources and books that show varying perspectives on, for instance, a literary work or an issue in psychology. Yeah.
Did you use the internet before a year and a half ago, like at the public library?
So I did use it some, but not really much at all. So.
And by the way, you should repeat the question because I think.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Yeah. So the question was whether I had used the internet before about a year and a half ago, and so I definitely had, but it was not nearly at the level that I did when I began. When I began learning computer science and finally had internet at home.
And did you get Wi-Fi because you were your parents like all get Wi-Fi?
So the question was whether my parents got Wi-Fi because of me, and the answer was no. They each are self-employed, so it was necessary for their businesses to succeed. And then it was, of course, very useful for me. So it was sort of all our needs mixed into the one cause.
So now that you have Wi-Fi and internet access, do you find yourself getting distracted by the internet? And does the internet prevent your sort of self-learning productivity?
So the question was whether having internet decreases my productivity as an autodidact. And so that's definitely been something that is a battle, because it's so easy, for one thing, to just look up answers and not really understand the material at hand and things like that. But I think I've been pretty successful in trying to battle that off. But that's definitely a challenge which I think most people face at some point in their lives. So it definitely has been something that I've had to work at.
Yeah, I mean, Stack Overflow. Just copy and paste.
Yeah. So yeah, he was saying how there's this site called Stack Overflow, and it can basically give you any answer to programming problems. So generally, you can just hack together something without really any knowledge of the material at hand.
So what are your plans? Are you graduated from high school now?
So the other question was like, what are my plans for my education? And so currently, I'm a junior. Even though I've gotten at the end of this year, I will have more credits than I need to graduate. So in my senior year, I plan to have sort of a gap year kind of experience because I was looking at many resources, and there was no distinctive benefit in going to college early. In fact, there were some detrimental things, and so it wasn't going to be optimal to go to college in what would have been my senior year. So I plan to travel and also still continue learning throughout my life. So I definitely won't stop education in my senior year.
How do you think you're going to do in college, considering college is much more structured?
Yeah, so the question was, how do I think I'll do in college, because it's such a different structure than with self-taught learning. And so I think that I'll be able to do pretty well, and I will be taking some courses at a local university, or auditing courses, next semester. And so that will enable me to gain a better understanding of the college environment. And when I did go to a private school for a year, I was able to very quickly integrate into that sort of environment. And the teachers, they all actually pointed it out to me that as a homeschooler, I was able to really quickly transition into that sort of environment. So I believe I'll be able to be quite successful in that more structured environment of college.
Do you have any idea yet what you want to major in? Or, I mean, what's your focus of your career? What is your sort of life focus?
Yeah, so the question was, what is my life focus, which could be in the form of like a college major? And so I'm definitely interested in majoring in computer science, and I love the scientific part of computer science. I like coding a lot, but I like when I can apply all the knowledge and information that I've gained into meaningful projects. And so I really like that part about like experimental computer science and theoretical computer science. And so I definitely plan to pursue that some. And then also, I'll of course code for the foreseeable future. So yeah.
Have you had some experience with algorithms and designing algorithms?
So the question was if I've had experience with designing algorithms, and the answer is I definitely have. And early on in my computer science education, I checked out a book from a local university, which was like algorithms and data structures in C++. And so I went in and developed like my own binary search algorithm like pretty soon into the course without actually reading the chapter on binary search. And then I went and read the chapter and saw if I'd gotten it right. And so I definitely like enjoy creating algorithms, and I actually pursued some facial recognition and things like that, even though that stuff is very advanced. So it took me a long time to study and understand how to bring about such a concept. Yeah. Cool.
All right.
Thank you all so much for coming.